we're going to bring in our colleague, Andrew Egger. There he is. There's that guy. He, this Republican primary talk is nice, but the real action, we all know, is in the Democratic presidential primary. And Andrew Egger has just been up in New Hampshire to see the juggernaut that is the Dean Phillips for president campaign. And I know what you're thinking. What more can be said about Dean Phillips? He's about to knock off Joe Biden for the nomination, but there is still a little more to be said about the Dean Phillips campaign. Andrew, welcome to Dispatch Live. What can be said at this point about Congressman Dean Phillips from Minnesota and his interesting challenge to Joe Biden for the nomination?
So the guy's got a good head of hair. I discovered this while I was up there. Some impressive in person. Used to be a lot longer, it turns out. Back in his business days, he had kind of the business mullet thing going on a little bit, the mover and shaker hairstyle. He's an interesting
in front,
guy.
Party in the back.
Yeah, exactly. He's an interesting guy because he's essentially putting himself forward as I want to be the avatar for all of these kind of anxieties and discomforts that you guys have about Joe Biden right now. And also I want to be the avatar for the kind of simmering resentment that some New Hampshire Democrats have about Biden's demotion of that state in the primary schedule. And it's basically any reason there is for anybody to be kind of mad at Joe Biden, Dean Phillips is there to be your shoulder to cry on. What is odd, and what I kind of realized was odd listening to him talk last night at Dartmouth College, which is where he was, he doesn't seem to have much of a theory of the race beyond that. There's not a big diagnosis of things that Biden has done poorly, or things that he would have done differently if he were in office, such that his approval ratings would not be this low. It's very much just kind of this like arithmetic. A generic Democrat does a lot better than Joe Biden in the polls. I am pretty generic. He kind of says that in his speech. He says, I've never thought of myself as generic, but I'm willing to be your generic Democrat if that's what it takes. And therefore pick me. And he also kind of says, I don't want to pick on the guy because he also says, look, it doesn't have to be me. I'm the only one who's kind of hopped in, but I would welcome a lot of other people. I mean, and again, to his credit, he was calling for much more prominent Democrats than himself to kind of be the people to cross this Rubicon months before he himself got in. But now he's basically saying, okay, well, so I guess it's me and him. So let's go. Let's do this thing. But it's strange because when it comes to the content, he's basically just recycling the kind of centrist bridge builder. Can we all just sit down and have conversations with each other stuff that he ran on the first time around for his House seat in Minnesota, which did well for him then. But it's not exactly it's unclear why that is the thing that Democrats are clamoring for, or why that would put him up over the top versus Donald Trump in a way that Biden can't get.
Well, Andrew, you said it was sort of an arithmetic argument. It's also it's really an actuarial argument as well, right? That the thing that Joe Biden has done wrong is that he was born too long ago, and that seems to me like a difficult starting point, even if everybody, and people are saying this privately among Democrats, everybody agrees that it's true that Joe Biden's too old. It just seems like a difficult place to really kind of launch any kind of campaign beyond all of the other structural problems that come with challenging a sitting incumbent.
Right. And I mean, what's interesting is that when Phillips was first making a lot of noise about how he didn't think Biden ought to be the nominee the next time around, he talked about his age a lot. I mean, he brought that up, and he has kind of stopped doing that in recent weeks, recent months. I'm not 100% sure why, but when he goes after him now, it's a little bit more like positional. He says, Joe Biden promised us he was going to be a transitional president. Well, look, we've transitioned now. And he says, I thought that Joe Biden was the only candidate who could beat Donald Trump in 2020. Now I'm pretty sure he's the only guy who could theoretically lose to him. And he talks about Bidenomics being kind of a cockamamie thing that voters don't like. And he talks about the border. I mean, it's like these weird, like, kind of some of these weird, more centrist polls. Those are kind of the two actual policy things, or at least policy messaging things that he brings up. But he never mentioned his age that I recall last night. And you again, yeah, you'd think that would be front and center, and unless, and I think this is kind of what you're alluding to a little bit, and what you guys were alluding to in the conversation about Trump a little bit ago. There's a lot of kind of potential ambulance chasing happening here, right? It's like a lot of people who are kind of trading on the small, but not as small as if they were younger, possibility that one or the other guy will have some kind of medical emergency or something like that. And then there'll be, somebody will need to be there to pick up the pieces. So again, he's not talking as though that's happening. And maybe that's why he's not even talking about the age so much anymore. But I just found that interesting.
Well, let's take a few questions, or while we're waiting for the questions, Starwalt, did you have?
I mean, I get it. I get Dean Phillips. I understand why. I mean, first of all, a guy who hires Steve Schmidt to work on his campaign, who is just a mess, right? And whose most notable accomplishments relate to the Lincoln Project and the Sarah Palin vice presidential nomination, that you're like, that's the guy. So you're going to start with some doubts about Dean Phillips' judgment in politics, for sure. But I definitely see why he's rich, right? He's got a discount liquor fortune, and he's Dear Abby's grandson. And I know. And so he's like, you might as well. You might get a delegate, and as Andrew said, something weird happens. Maybe, better to have some delegates than no delegates.
Right.
If you get to some sort of a contested convention.